Welcome, everybody. I'm Dr. Brett Warwick, Deputy Federal Air Surgeon, and welcome to a special edition of Grand Rounds. And as I said earlier, for those of you who are just joining us, we're glad to have you here. We had Grand Rounds very recently, and there were a lot of questions came about out of that. Could you guys share some more information with us? Could you tell us a little bit more about some of the changes that you're making up here at the Office of Aerospace Medicine? And that's what we're about. So we'll go ahead and get started. But first, let me turn this over to Miss Christy Risley, and she'll be giving you a rundown on how to get your CME and some of the technical aspects of the grand rounds. Christy, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, as Dr. Wyrick said, I am Christy Risley. I am the Instructional Systems Specialist for the AME Education Division. Welcome, everybody, tonight. We do have a lot of information to share with you. As part of our accreditation, all of our speakers sign a disclosure of any prohibited relationships. This will be our declaration for this session that nobody had anything to disclose. We have no prohibited relationships to disclose for our speakers. These are objectives for this evening. We're going to identify the new color vision policy changes. We're going to identify the new process and the AME requirements for deferrals and denials. And then we're also going to talk about the new medical bill of rights. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Frazier.
Thanks, Christy. All right, so some things you need to know about color vision. The color vision policy is changing and it will be effective January 1, 2025. It's actually pretty simple. It's split into two parts. One is screening, one is testing. Screening will now require modernized equipment, one of three new computer-based tests, the ones that have been in the AME guide for at least a year. The other tests will go away. The first thing we're going to talk about is who actually needs screening versus who will be grandfathered in. The next piece is color vision testing. Color vision testing will be required for certain conditions or if pilots are taking certain medications that can affect color vision. Until your pilot gets a letter or an off letter that asks for color vision testing, we don't need it. So two pieces, one is screening, one is testing. So let's talk about the screening for pilots. The first thing is, if they're a returning pilot who has previously passed any color vision test with the FAA, they're grandfathered in, they're good. You can give them a medical certificate. You do not have to do a computer-based test on them. If they have an LOE, letter of evidence, or a SOTA, and they want to keep that same letter of evidence or SOTA, you do not need to retest them. The only people who need to be tested on the new equipment is a brand new pilot. You'll see that on the right-hand side of your screen with the yellow letters. New pilots who've never been through our system, or anyone who has a SOTA or a letter of evidence or a limitation, which AMEs will apply their number 16 or 17, and they want it removed. So the rule of thumb is basically, if a pilot walks into your office and has a previous medical certificate, whatever limitation, LOE, or SOTA they've had on it stays, they walk out with the same. If they are a brand new pilot, they need a computer test. If they want to change or eliminate that limitation, SOTA or LOE, they need a new computer-based test. The other important thing that you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, if you test a pilot using one of these computer-based tests and they fail, we do not want you to defer. Issue third-class medical certificate only, and there will be a new limitation that's available in AMCS in the next couple of weeks. It will be limitation 104. It will say valid for day VFR rules only. So important pieces. Returning pilots who already have a medical certificate are basically grandfathered in. If they want an upgrade because they have a SOTA, an LOE, or a limitation, they have to get a new computer-based test. If they've never been through our system, first-time applicant, they have to get a computer-based test. Anybody who passes, they're done. It's a one-time screen. Anybody who fails, give them a third-class medical with limitation 104. These are the names of the three color tests that we allow. You can find them in the AME guide. We're updating the links so that you'll be able to find them easier. But these are the three that were tested Dr. Chittister in a minute is going to talk about the testing and the research that was performed. This is what we spoke about for returning pilots. Basically, if they have passed a previous test, they are grandfathered in. Put that in item 52 and issue if they're otherwise qualified. If they fail, tell us what test they failed. You'll need to upload that score. If they fail, like we spoke about, give them a third class with limitation 104. First-time applicants, as long as they pass any of the computer tests, they're fine. They can take the same computer test multiple times. The computer tests are random. It's not like they could memorize the order or the sequence. So they can, if you've got a CAD, they can take it 3 times, same day in the office. If they pass it at all, give them a certificate. If they don't pass, give them a third class with limitation 104. Question from the AMEs from the last couple of sessions. If you don't have a test, do you have to defer? No, if you do not have one of the computer tests and your pilot needs to be screened, you can issue with limitation 104 on a third class certificate. You do not have to own these tests. If you have an optometrist in your area, if you've got an eye clinic in your area who has one of these tests, we will accept those results. But you as the AME need to make sure and be comfortable that that result belongs to that pilot. We got a question in the last couple of days. If the pilot themselves logs into one of the test screening and downloads it and takes the test, can we use that? No. We need to know that somebody actually administered the test the right way. A lot of the screens have where the person doing the test can sign it. You as the AME, we're going to ask you to review the color screening just like you do an EKG. If you're comfortable that test result belongs to that pilot, you can accept it and upload it. If you're not comfortable, then you're going to defer. Part number 2 for color vision testing. This is only if somebody has an acquired color deficiency, usually due to a medical condition or medication. We are starting to update the AME guide for specific conditions that will require color vision testing. If we need color vision testing, it should be one of these 3 computer-based tests. We do not need it unless we ask for it in the off letter. As we move forward and increase the conditions that we ask for color vision testing in the AME guide, you'll see it in the evaluation data. It's just like anything we would ask for. So if somebody has low thyroid and we ask for a TSH, same concept. So here's your color vision summary. 1 is screening. This starts January 1st, 2025. Returning pilots grandfathered in. If they have a limitation, a SOTA, or a letter of evidence, and they want to upgrade, they have to take a new computer-based test. If they're a new applicant, first time through the FAA system, they have to take a color-based test. If they pass, they're done. If they are unable to pass any of the tests, give them a third class medical certificate with limitation 104. There will be a process if the pilot wants to ask for reconsideration. We will post that in the AME guide. Part number 2 is testing. If they have a specific condition that requires or that can result in colored vision deficiency, we will add that to their off letter. That's it. Part 1 is screening, part 2 is testing. And with that, I want to turn it over to Dr. Tom Chittister, who actually did the research on the color vision. Over to you, Dr. Chittister.
So I won't take credit for all the research. I had partners in this, and I'll mention them as we go forward. Why are we doing this? We're responding to an NTSB recommendation. It's listed there. And they wanted us to develop a standard battery of tests that would be performed at least once on each applicant. They argued for commercial, class 1 or 2, that would prevent applicants with color vision deficiencies that could impair their ability to perform is a critical concept, from being certificated without limitations. So think about color vision. Color vision deficiency is a scaled loss of sensitivity to red, green, and or yellow-blue discrimination, affecting about 8% of men and less than 1% of women. My colleagues in this were Dr. Nelda Milburn, who's since retired, Kevin Gilday, who's now working with Flight Standards. And what we set out to do was evaluate a wide range of tests and devices that were available in 2010 when we started this research. And what we did was test over 300 aviation naive subjects in Oklahoma and upstate New York, because Rensselaer Polytechnic University was there and partnered with us. Half of the subjects were diagnosed with color vision deficiencies. We examined 18 clinical tests, and then we examined performance on job sample tests, and I'll talk about those. And then perhaps this is the most important thing for the conversation. We established less than normal color vision scores. So the criteria is not normal color vision or deficient color vision. The criterion is sufficient color vision sensitivity to be able to discriminate the colors that are required in these job sample tests. And the job sample tests were signal and airport lighting. City University of London, who developed the CAD and validated it, had shown that the PAPI, the Precision Approach Path Indicator, they found that to be the most critical because it was the task with the least redundant coding. And then we also looked at cockpit display color because that's changed quite a bit over the years. So we made a set of recommendations out of the research. I'll talk about each of those. First, we said there are certain tests we need to discontinue, and we need to authorize computer-based tests. At the time that we did this work, we identified 7 tests that were previously authorized that had a limited number of trials or trials that were fixed in position. And we found that those were pretty easily memorized, and so they lost sensitivity and specificity. Some of those tests were losing up to 91% of their sensitivity. What seems to be critical is to have many trials with randomization. That appears to be critical to establishing reliability and validity versus the Noggle anomaloscope. That's the red-green color standard. There's not one for yellow-blue in that case. And Jeff Rabin had reported, he's the person who worked on the cone contrast test, developed that. He reported that non-computerized pseudo-isochromatic plate test missed 20% of persons with less than normal color vision per the anomaloscope. And there's a reference there to that particular study. So first thing we did, don't want to use a set of tests. We want to be able to use these computerized tests. These computerized tests are measuring degree of sensitivity loss. So something analogous to a hearing test, rather than simply does the person have normal color vision or color vision deficiency and giving a diagnosis of that. The CAD and the cone contrast test explicitly did that. They are tests deliberately intended to study loss of sensitivity and quantify that. The computerized color vision test, the Wagner test, turns out to be highly correlated, and it gets good correlations by having large number of trials and randomizing those. The second thing that we recommended was that if we were continue to use the 8 tests that we found that were non-computerized, that had good reliability and validity, if we continued to use them, we were going to need to limit the number of testing attempts. And the reason for that was that we found that if you failed any one of those and then took another one, you doubled the odds you would not be able to pass the job sample test. So you took the first one, you failed it. You took the second non-computerized test and you passed. We doubled the chances that you would fail the job sample tests. We recommended that we include yellow-blue screening. That became important with advances in color cockpit displays. And then we said, consider adding tests that have multiple randomized trials if the manufacturer will present us with evidence of reliability and validity, and also present to us less than normal color vision cut scores that can be demonstrated to be equivalent to the CAD, the cone contrast test, and the computerized color vision test. So it's not these 3 tests forever. We will accept other good quality tests that are presented and validated by the manufacturer, but they're going to need to be computerized, randomized, and have a large number of trials. So this is the slide, and I'm not going to go through all of this in great detail, but this is the slide that was presented at ASMA in 2015 to demonstrate how we set the cut points that were below the diagnostic points for normal color vision. So this particular study, so this was a subset of the 300. We had 95 subjects, half with color vision deficiency, half without. We gave them 8 tests that we had previously found that were pretty good non-computerized tests, and we gave them the 3 computerized tests, and then we gave them a set of occupational tests, and those are job samples. So we did incandescent red and white lights, so those simulate the PAPI. We did LED, light emitting diode, red and white lights, also simulating the newer technology for PAPI. Then we did the signal light gun test. That's red, green, and white lights. And the signal light gun test is actually appears in an FAA order, so it has its own cut scores already published. And then we did cockpit display colors. We used red, white, green, blue, cyan, yellow, amber, and magenta. Those are taken from the SAE color recommendations in ARP 4032, if you want to go and look that up. And we did some chromaticity sampling from a number of different displays that had been deployed in cockpits that use those particular colors. We then calculated pass-fail scores for the job sample tests. And what we did for each one, with the exception of the signal light gun, which has an FAA standard, we looked at what 95% of color normal people could do. And that's good and bad. I mean, people who have normal color vision just don't fail these job sample tests when we've presented them to them, unless they make a cognitive error or just a simple random error. So we can't say 100%, because not everybody with normal color vision who takes it will pass 100%. So we chose 95. And that is the same criterion that we use for our air traffic control color vision testing, where we actually employ air traffic controllers. So we ended up with those 4 tests, each with a cut score of the 95th percentile. Actually, the 5th percentile would be a better way to describe it. Then in turn, we looked at who passed and who failed among folks with a color vision deficiency. We cross-tabulated and graphed or charted the passes and the fails, and we identified for each of the clinical tests cut points that would optimally discriminate who passed and who fails. We calculated a kappa score for each of those, and for each of those clinical tests with job sample test performance. What we found was the cone contrast test and the CAD separated the job sample test performance at their published certification scores, not normal, abnormal, but the certification scores that they've each published. And we might have expected that going in, because the CAD was validated with respect to the PAPI, the Precision Approach Path Indicator System, and the cone contrast test was validated with the military, the Air Force work. We were able to set less than color normal scores additionally for the Wagner computerized color vision test with equivalent results. We were able to do that. And we had some similar success for 8 of the previously approved clinical tests if they added the yellow-blue supplement. And for all of these tests, we found that the average kappa score ended up being 0.72. It ranged from 0.70 to 0.78. It was unlikely to be higher because of how we defined passing on the job sample test at the 5th percentile. So when you have multiple tests, each with a 5th percentile screen, you end up with people failing who really shouldn't be failing. So that's how we ended up using that criterion. So our expectations here, we're not saying they have to have normal color vision. These new computer tests should be easier to pass at an occupationally validated score rather than a normal versus color vision deficient score. So the argument here is that we don't really have a reason to expect that anyone who could pass a medical flight test would fail here. That's why we set the scores where we set them. So the passing score for each test is validated against signal and airport lighting and cockpit display color discrimination and is lower than the diagnostic score for normal color vision. However, people who could pass some of the paper-based pseudoisochromatic plate tests through practice and memorization and who have substantially less than normal color vision will likely to be detected and restricted by these accepted computerized tests. So we expect to detect more people with less than normal color vision sensitivity, but expect to pass and clear a similar number to those who could pass a medical flight test for color vision. Those are our expectations. So why did we choose these tests? Well, 3 of the things I've already talked about. We're worried about tests that have limited numbers of trials and fixed in position because you can memorize those, and so you lose sensitivity and specificity. Tests with many trials and randomization appear to be critical to reliability and validity. The computerized tests are measurements of degree of sensitivity loss, analogous to what we do with hearing testing, rather than simply diagnosing normal versus deficient color vision. And that allowed us to set lower than normal color vision cut scores, where we expect people to be able to make color discriminations required by flight. Ultimately, we chose to limit ourselves to the 3 computerized tests over adding the 8 non-computerized tests that we could get good results for to enable multiple testing opportunities without increasing risk. If we were to include those 8 non-computerized tests, failing a single test and passing another doubled the risk of inability to discriminate the signal and surface lighting and the cockpit display colors. And then another thing that was a factor that I have to own up to is availability at the time of initiating the research at AME in 2010. That's a factor. So we will consider future tests that are presented by the manufacturers that are focused on sensitivity loss and that have multiple random trials, provided they will present evidence of reliability and validity along with appropriate cut scores. Now, I'm not saying they have to replicate the research we did. What I'm saying is I want to see a reliability score, test, retest, internal consistency, and validity, evidence that the construct that is tested is in fact red, green, and yellow, blue color vision and degree of sensitivity with that. And then evidence that a cut score that they offer is equivalent to the cut scores on CAD, cone contrast, or the computerized color vision. So they probably would have to test subjects on those other tests and their own tests to meet that criterion. So what are the tests that are out there? The Wagner computerized color vision test, or CCVT. The cost is $1,000 for the license or $29.99 a month. Judith gave you the link earlier. Here's another copy of that link. If you take this test, you do an initial screen, 26 general section and 10 in the Triton section. And if you fail 1 of the Triton and 2, I believe, of the general section, you'll get prompted to take the Protan, Dutan, and an extended Triton section. So we will either accept them passing the general section and Triton section up front, or if they fail that, getting at least 20 of 32 in the Protan section, 20 of 32 in the Dutan section, and 10 out of 12 in the Triton section. All right. The color assessment and diagnosis developed in Great Britain, so color is misspelled. That is over $15,000 now. You don't have to buy it yourself. You can use someone else who has used that, another provider who has that test. We will accept either a normal diagnosis of which would be a red-green loss of sensitivity of less than 1.7 standard deviation units, and yellow-blue less than 1.7. So that's the definition of normal. Or, and I think this gives you an idea of how much sensitivity loss people can have before they're going to fail these tests. A red-green threshold of less than 6 standard deviation units if they're diagnosed as a deutan, and less than 12 if they're diagnosed as a protan, and a yellow-blue threshold of less than 2.4. So given that 95% of people, if we ignore gender, see color in the same way, you end up with a distribution where 95% of the population is jammed up against the left side. You have a very long tail to the right. Those standard deviation units are relatively small, but it's a good distance out there before we see people failing these tests without loss of sensitivity. And then finally, the cone contrast test on the next slide, the Raven cone contrast test, the military and commercial version. We want to see a score of 75 on red, green, and blue. And 75 is 2 standard deviations below the mean. So that's about 1.7 is normal. Beyond 2 standard deviations below the mean, that works for this test as well. That's available for $10,000 with ANOVA systems. And I think that's my last slide.
Hey, thank you, everybody. Thank you for the questions, and we'll try and save some more time later on for further questions. And Dr. Chittister, I want to thank you for the excellent rundown on how we got to this decision and some of the work that went in there. And one of the things I'm blessed with is to have the great research that's done down at AME available at my fingertips. And it's a world-class organization and it's world-class research. Thank you so much, everyone, for who participated in that. Now we need to talk one more again, go over the changes in the deferral and denial process. Now, for most of the aviation medical examiners out there, this is not going to be any kind of big changes that are going to affect the way you practice or the way that you operate as an AME. The big thing is that everybody who's been in seminar with Dr. Northrup or I over the past several years has heard us all say the same thing. As an aviation medical examiner, it's not your job to deny anybody, okay? I want to reiterate that. We're not asking AMEs to deny anybody. That's not the point, okay? Dr. Northrup and I and the rest of the FAA staff, we get paid to be the bad guys. But what we have asked you to do is when you cannot issue, when you find something that is aeromedically disqualifying or aeromedically uncertain and needs further review, we ask you to defer. And we're going to talk about some of the changes that we're going to be doing here at the FAA. Okay, so the situation is the AME defers an applicant. What happens next? Okay, aerospace medicine, that's AM, reviews documentation. We look at the 8500-8, the uploaded items, and our question is, is there enough information present to make a certification disposition? And if the answer is yes, we make a determination on the medical certificate, and we're talking about deferred examinations again. If we've got everything that we need to make a medical decision, we go ahead and do that, and we issue a medical certificate, or we deny based on do we have enough information. So the answer is if we've got everything that we need, we'll make a decision. If the answer is no, now this is where it's going to be different here on January 1st. If the answer is no, then we're going to go ahead and deny most of the pilots at that point. Now, what's different is that in the past, we would have said, hey, you're in a deferred status, and we would have sent a request for additional information. This is what we need to see in order to make a determination on your application. What's going to happen now is they're going to go into denial status, and we'll send them a denial form, and we'll also tell them we'll also indicate the items that we need for reconsideration. Now, this is different, as I said. It says we used to send a letter and we said, we're unable to establish eligibility, and here's your information request. What we're going to do now is we're going to say you are now in a denied status. This is a general denial, and then we'll tell them what's needed for reconsideration. Okay, so AME defers. What happens next? Okay, so we deny, the pilot is denied, so the pilot can submit the required documents as they obtain. There's no time limitation on this as long as the certificate, um, as long as the application is valid or the class applied for is valid. The pilot is denied, gets to, they're not going to, if they can't get for instance, if they can't get a neurosurgical consult or a cardiology consult in the next 90 days, we're not going to hassle them. We're not going to hound them as we have in the past. They don't have to ask for an extension. They're in a denied status, so it's on them. And they don't have to, we're relieving them of the burden of worrying about meeting deadlines when they try to come up with additional information. There's no time constraint to submit it within a certain time, except for the fact that if they're applying for third class, it's got to be done during the length of time that the certificate would be authorized. Okay. And there's no more failure to provide letters. We're not going to say, hey, and it saves, and what this does, and there's no extensions needed. So it puts the burden back on the applicant and it relieves the Federal Aviation Administration, my staff, of a lot of manpower that goes into keeping up with the status of all these documents that are in deferred status. And it gives us the ability to look at more people, more applications, process more applications, and hopefully speed up the process for everybody. So you defer. What should you do? Again, let me reiterate, not your job to deny. That's our job. We'll send the denial, okay? But what you can, if you're going to defer, add all the clarifying information or explanations that you can in item 60. Okay. Transmit the exam within 14 days and upload any supporting documents or evaluation data. And read everything you submit and clear up errors or request supporting information to clarify. Okay. And let me talk to you just a little bit about that. So if, for instance, how do we speed up the process? One, transmit the exam within 14 days. But within that 14 days, so you've got somebody in your office and you say, hey, I'm going to have to defer you because I don't know about I don't know about this cardiology visit that you had that you've reported on the 8508, and I'm going to have documentation of that. If you can get that to me this afternoon or tomorrow or 3 days from now, then go ahead and upload it and send it with the deferral. Yeah, the airman told me that that they saw a cardiologist for chest pain. They were cleared up. Here's the clinical note, and perhaps we can make a decision on that. All right. And the other thing is, if it's not, if they can't round up the information within the next 14 days, we understand. Okay, go ahead and transmit, and we'll take care of it. We'll take care of it from there, and we'll send them a denial, and we'll send them a request for reconsideration. AME actions are critical. Okay, now one of the things is it's different than the way we've been doing business for ever since I've been in the organization, and a lot longer than that, I suspect. But inform your pilot of the process. Let them know that they may receive a denial letter with information needed for reconsideration. Educate your pilot. Let them know what documents to bring to your office before their exam starts. Okay, check the AME guide for disposition tables to make sure that it is a condition that you need to defer with, and it's not something that that's not something that you can handle yourself. And also check the pilot's letter of authorization. Make sure that they've brought everything that they need to do. And if you've got that in your hand, then go ahead and send that when you send your when you send your deferral. Now, one of the things that people have asked us is, okay, so hey, so if we're going to go ahead and the airman is denied, and does that mean they have to come back for another examination before they can be reconsidered? And the answer is no. This is a general denial. All right, this is general denial. We don't have the information that we need to make a decision. We're going to go ahead and deny. However, here's the information that we need. When the airman provides that to us, we can go ahead and say, yep, we can do it from here, and we'll either give them at that time we'll make a decision. Either we give them a certificate or we move them into the final denial process. All right. Again, educate your pilot, let them know what documents to bring to your office before the exam, and check the pilot's letter of authorization and check the AME guide disposition tables. Summary: defer when appropriate, no change. Okay. Inform your pilots they may receive a denial letter with the list of items that are needed for reconsideration. And whenever you get some from the federal government, it says your application is denied, right? A lot of times people don't read any further. They don't read down into the letter, and the next thing we know, we've got a call from their congressman. Happens all the time. All right, so let them know they may receive a denial letter. Take care of the items that are necessary. Help your pilot understand their next steps for certification. Help them obtain the evaluations and submit the documents back to you. All right. And one of the other things that we're required to do now, and this is going to be the medical bill of rights. All right, we've got a medical bill of rights out there, but the Congress has, in the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024, says there's some additional language that is necessary out there. That will be coming out. And in the meantime, if you guys have any suggestions on how we can improve the AME guide, then please, here's your contact information. All right, and let's look in the questions and see what we've got going on there. So, and for everybody again, the one of the things is, with the change in the policy about denials and deferred status. Again, this will free up resources that will help us ultimately get more pilots through there, and get your applications, the work that you do, processed quicker by the FAA staff. And ultimately, it's going to be a value to the pilots also, because we believe that this will be putting the responsibility back on the pilots. It's going to help them be an active participant in the process, and will also motivate them to higher energy efforts, we believe. So, and with that, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight and listening to the presentation. I want to thank Dr. Chittister for presenting the incomparable research data, and I want to thank Dr. Frazier, who works extremely hard all the time, trying to make sense and translate what can be somewhat daunting Code of Federal Regulations into usable information for all of our aviation medical examiners. And on behalf of Dr. Northrup, who couldn't be here tonight because of a previous commitment, I want to say thank you to all of you for your interest in aviation safety. Thank you for being aviation medical examiners with us, and thank you for taking the time to keep your skills and your knowledge updated for us. We appreciate you more than you know, and we wish you all happy holidays and a great deal of success in the coming new year. And with that, back over to Christy Risley, please.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of reminders as we wrap up. First off, if your first and last name were not displayed on the screen, you will not be able to receive CME credit. So you need to make sure of that. Also, the email address to send your request for credit is posted there on the slide. It's also in the chat as well. Please make sure that you include your first and last name, as well as your AME number. And also, for those of you that are watching this recording, we appreciate your time and watching the recording. However, we will not be able to give you credit for watching the recording. Only live participants will receive credit for this session. So thank you all for coming, and I'll echo what Dr. Wyrick said. Happy holidays to everyone. We appreciate your interest in aviation safety.